All right, folks. My name is Thomas Hoffecker. Sorry about the technical delays here, but that just makes it more of a challenge. There's 191 slides to go through. There's a lot of screenshots, so I think we'll be able to make it. And unfortunately, it's not dual display, so I'll be looking at the screen back here. Why isn't it? There. Alrighty. So, again, this is exploiting PKI for fun and profit, or the next yellow lock icon. And that title will become a little bit more apparent as I move through the talk. Quick agenda. Some of the talks yesterday dealt specifically with some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, mainly the code signing cert that Dave Kennedy mentioned, and then also Bruce Potter talking about the key length and trusting CAs. The typical legal disclaimer, I'm a government employee. I'm not here representing the government. I'm solely representing myself. One thing I won't talk about is there is a smart card for classified networks, and I won't answer any questions, so don't ask. So this is who I am, long history of what I do. I do have a charity, a couple charities that I'm pimping here. So Maryland Westie Rescue takes in Westies that have been either turned in by owners or come from puppy mills. A lot of those puppy mills are from central Ohio and also in Pennsylvania. So ninja or pirate, neither. Shooter by birth, operator in training. These are some of the charities that I'm also plugging, so please feel free to donate to these guys. They're the people that go out and do stuff like take care of bin Laden and some of the other terrorists that have been gotten. So here's some of the other research. One of the things that really scared me was the crazies published the URLs and also uploaded to one of the media sites is the CRLs, which are public, and they made a big deal out of it, but really they're out there to be had, to be retrieved, and you can find some stuff in them as far as what's available. One of the things as far as when you're exploring PKI is the EFF's project of SSL Observatory. You can find a lot of CAs that aren't well known. They mapped the internet on 443 looking for these. So a little bit of a refresher. Your public key is public. It's used to encrypt stuff, and then only your private key can decrypt it. There's a mathematical relationship. The CAs, I think pretty much everybody's aware of the CAs with all the DigiNotar stuff that went on. There's revocation lists. Moxie Marlinspike also had a little bit of research about OCSP, which is one of the protocols that's used to verify the certificate status. And the number 3 is part of SSL sniff. It will actually tell the browser that's asking for the check that it can't either answer the questions. Different browsers handle that different ways. So if you're able to eject yourself into the middle of that conversation, you can basically fool the browser and tell them, hey, everything's okay with that certificate. So here's what EFF found. Lots of certificates out there, all kinds of organizations. There's actually a huge PDF map where they allow all the CAs and the hierarchies. So if you're looking at PKI from a recon perspective, there's a lot of things that you can find. You wind up looking at your whois data, and then you can supplement that from your normal footprinting. You want to look at the CRLs, where those are stored. They'll be available by HTTP or LDAP in a lot of times, and sometimes you can actually gather some more interesting stuff of what type of CA that they're using in their software. So what the other stuff that you can find is you can find email addresses for the points of contact. You can also, like I said, get information about what the PKI infrastructure is running. If you can undermine the PKI infrastructure, you basically got control of the system. You've got the crown jewels, and as we saw in the DigiNotar case, you know, in Iran, they basically used that to eavesdrop and view all the communications. So actually, Sans had a really good short little tutorial on how to take the CRLs I'm not going to go into details on the CRLs. Like I said, there's a lot of slides in here, and I want to make sure we get through most of them. So if you go out and you start looking for CAs, there's policies and practices that they publish that will talk about key links, how to handle the keys, different procedures and policies that they have in maintaining the CA. A lot of times you can get good information out of it. I have one particular case where I show the DoD policy, and they talk about what's required to protect the CA, physical security. So looking at defense contractor, we've got SAIC. They're actually mapped in the EFF SSL Observatory. So you can see them down there by the red arrow, and that's actually the entire SSL mapping that EFF did. And they're moving to model this more in a distributed fashion, also build in a reputation type service. So that will help when CAs get discredited or aren't popular by reputation, that you can get a warning that other people don't have a trust in this CA. So here's the SAIC homepage. So what you'll want to look for is anything with SSL encryption, so employee portals, OWA, where you can look at the certificate, and then hopefully if it's like an employee portal, possibly they'll use their own CA and not a public certificate from, let's say, a VeriSign or one of the other public CAs. So here you've got 4 different, links that you can go to different employee applications. One of these is actually using a private CA. So in red, you'll see circled, you've got the OU of CSYS, and then of course you've got the validity dates. So here we've already got an indication that there's a private CA in play, and that you can actually look at this, and based upon this next slide here, you'll see where the CRLs are. So that's all the CRLs. And here you have that it's a Microsoft CA, and you'll get the actual version number also. So based upon this, we already know that their internal PKI infrastructure is based upon Microsoft Active Directory. Most likely, did they separate their Active Directory into a separate forest to take care of these applications? Probably not, because they've got all the user authentication tied in with their employees' corporate network login. And of course, here you'll see that they've also referenced the same URL. So what they've done here is they have their public CA where they have their public certificates that are outward facing towards the internet. In addition, they've also put their private CA information out there, so you can actually download the CRL, decode it, and then get information as far as their internal structure, as far as their DNS. Again, you won't find the IP addresses of the servers, and anything that you find, if it's truly external, you won't be able to DNS resolve it, but you'll be able to know what the name of it is, and that may give you an important clue as to what the function of the server is. Again, here you'll see that there's the URL that references the actual practice statement. And here's the actual mapping that I pulled down from Netcraft, that you'll know that it's IIS-6, so it's probably a good assumption that they are using Active Directory's CA to support this effort. So going on to the federal side, I work for DoD, so I'm very familiar with the implementation that this has out there. Just looking at some basic Google queries, you'll find information as far as the routes and some training. So looking at this training, you can deduct how the authentication happens, and that, they use a smart card, and, this training here goes into all the things that you're supposed to do with it. Like, you have to have 2 forms of ID, it's a Rapids workstation, there's information on Rapids. Here's what you'll need to get yourself up and running. You need the smart card reader, you need some middleware, you need the driver, you need the CAs loaded. So if you wanted to go get one, and you're not working for the government, or DoD in this case, you can just jump out to eBay, and you've got all kinds of different versions of what you need to just purchase. And again, here's the thing. With some of the other stuff that I've seen here, if you do buy a keyboard or another device, you may want to pop the cover on that to make sure there isn't any additional hardware on there. Now for the middleware, you'll need to look for purchasing one of these middleware sites. There's a good site, militarycac.com, that's actually run by a Army soldier. He is got all kinds of tips on how to make it work with different operating systems, has links to people that sell the middleware, and you may want to use your Google Foo, and you can possibly find it out there. So there's a site that offers it for download. There's an alternative. There's a Linux Live CD that the Air Force Research Lab has designed. It basically puts all the middleware and everything into a bootable Linux CD, and there's the URL for that. It's actually been in the news quite recently, so it will work pretty well for what you want. The one thing is with some of the other certificates, you may need to put it on a USB stick because you'll have to add some certificates roots because of one of the certificates that you might want to use. So back to the training here, it talks about, if you don't receive an email, or if you send an email and you're going to put a URL or some other type of content in there that's directive in nature, you'll want to make sure that you sign that. You'll see here how people are supposed to be trained, and they're supposed to look for the sign by. There's also, in the bottom right-hand corner, there is the Tumbleweed Desktop Validator. It's a separate piece of software that will go out and talk to the OCSP server and actually validate the certificate. It will pop up a box. Most of the time, users find that annoying, and they'll wind up having it reconfigured so it doesn't pop up. So they'll never know when a certificate's actually been revoked. The little box, dialog box of digital signature invalid, if that is not checked, you won't get any type of warning that the signature or the encryption, that there's something wrong with it or something may be afoot. So more of the same. And here's the other screen that if you opened it up in detail, you'll actually see what's wrong with it. So the reason I call this the, next to yellow padlock icon is because this is very similar to what everybody saw in IE prior to Microsoft, putting up the screen with, hey, warning, there may be something wrong here. Do you really want to do this? And you had to forcibly click and then actually go in and accept the certificate. So here's what you're supposed to put in these types of encrypted messages. Again, it's only for unclassified use. And here you've got a URL in the message, and they've encrypted it. So how do you get those certificates? Because you need those. There's a directory service that DISA hosts called Global Directory Service. And you can go out there with your browser and then open the vCard and then import that into your Outlook. So one of the other things is if, every 3 years, just like DoD and all the other federal agencies that are implementing HSPD 12, you'll get issued a new card, and then you have all those encrypted messages that you can't read anymore because you don't have that key. There's a way to recover that key. That key comes in the form of a soft cert that you actually download to your machine, and then you get a screen image that contains the, key so that you can import that key. So ideally, those shouldn't be left out there. Who knows, you may be able to find those out there also. So here's the best part. If you read what it says here in that little box, anybody can use this training for any reason whatsoever. I thought it was kind of ironic that they put that out there and then I got to use this. So we covered the PKI training, which is not a mandatory thing. There is a requirement for annual IA awareness training in DoD under FSMA. So they do cover that. There's some other free training available from DISA that includes phishing. You may be able to use that in your organization. So this is the actual information assurance training. There's one particular room that they deal with email and signed email and encryption. With the human resources email, yes, it's signed, and you're supposed to click that. But that's all. They don't talk about anything as far as, hey, make sure that the signature's valid. So there's no user awareness. The red ribbon gives a false sense of security. So I mentioned the CAC already. Here's Rapids. It's a system in the workstations that issue the CAC. So it arrives as a blank smart card. There's an operator of the terminal, and then a second smart card reader will actually be used to put the certificate onto the machine. You can get plenty of information out there on the CAC. If you're outside the DoD NIPRNet and you want to grab all the ECA certificates and the DoD certificates, you can get them on that website. You'll need those to be able to communicate. So looking at that certificate from DoD PKI, you'll see that you have the two different CRL distribution points. And then looking at interoperability between the DoD and the federal. So there's plenty of places where you can find information. There's a NIST publication, SP 832. It talks there about HSPD 12 and the Federal Bridge Certificate Authority. So what is happening is all of the federal agencies are implementing these smart cards, and they're all cross-signing and joining this PKI hierarchy where you can actually be authenticated across multiple federal agencies. In addition to federal agencies, you've got DoD contractors that are actually joining this. You've got states. So bottom right-hand corner, you've got the state of Colorado, state of Kansas. So in theory, you should be able to use, as a state employee, be able to get access to some of these sites because of all the cross-signing between all the certificate authorities. I already mentioned 832 goes into great detail on how to do the cross-signing and how those procedures are established. And here's some more DoD policies. So looking at this, I already talked about GDS a little. This is actually from the DISA website, and they talk about an electronic directory. So here's a little bit more detail. There's actually 2 directory sites that you can go to, and it provides you a DoD-wide search capability for names, email addresses, phone numbers, and certificates. So the first one there says anyone with a valid DoD, PKI, or ECA certificate can access that. So if you're not in the DoD, but what's this ECA certificate thing? You wind up doing a little research in what the ECA certificates for external organizations outside of DoD, for, let's say, suppliers and vendors to actually be able to communicate in a secure fashion with DoD. So they have different assurance levels, different categories, and there's an identity proofing involved. So that can range anything from a trusted agent that will issue the other types of smart cards for DoD employees. There's smart card versions, there's soft certificates. So here are the 2 that I actually looked at. So here's the first one. And when I first went to this website, I saw one particular thing that said, hey, there's a social engineering opportunity here, and walk-ins welcome. So I had a great experience. I didn't make an appointment, but you'll see the results of what I was able to do. So the cost for the ECA certificate, if you get the software-based one, is $100. So if you're, let's say, in sales, dealing with DoD, $100 gets you access to a directory where you can search out everyone in DoD, and you can get the information as far as their phone numbers, email addresses, and it's a great way to build up your points of contact for different organizations. So here again, ORC, they've got various agencies that they support. They fully support HSPD 12 and the PIV program. They actually, in their front door, when I went to go see them, had this big sign that says, do you need access to sensitive government facilities? And they had the pictures of the 2 different types of smart cards that they issued. So a little brochure that they had there that I collected talks about their different accomplishments. The other side of it. So the poster was very similar to what you see down here in the bottom right-hand corner. So their website, of course, gives a lot of information where they're located. Their Virginia office is up in Fairfax, support issuance of the actual hard token. So this is where they're actually located at. So they're on the 2nd floor there, and you'll notice that it's also where the headquarters of the NRA is, which I sort of found ironic. So social engineering that I did, I walked in without the appointment that I mentioned. I attempted to find out where the CA hardware is actually located. They do have a 24-hour presence there. They do have a knock. The reason I know that is the exit door had a sign on it that said, don't lock the door or don't, enable the alarm because there's someone here 24 hours. So I assume that they probably maybe have, Monday through Friday 24-hour support, and then maybe on the weekends they don't. So I did ask lots of questions, and the gentleman was very helpful. So, I asked, hey, how does this work? Where are these soft certs? What happens to them? So he did tell me that a lot of them get stolen, and that they get requests from Cybercom to have them deleted. So obviously they wind up getting lost. And they do have 0 complaints as far as people that have lost their certificate. It doesn't work anymore, but no one's ever called to complain. So obviously those people either never used it or had it or lost it. I was kind of surprised at that. One of the other things he shared is a system called JPass. They were going to start going to smart card authentication on that. Question? I haven't looked at it that close. I assume that you can probably go out there to retrieve it, and as soon as the certificate is revoked, they would publish it. I mean, it's right there. I've not tried to map that out or any way type graph that over time. Mm-hmm. So this was actually inside, and trying to sneak photos with a cell phone camera didn't work out too well. But the room I was in, the guy had to leave for 10 minutes. So he did offer that the break room was next door and I could go get some water. So I did that. Standing just outside the door of the room where the machine was that did the certificate issuance there's an access point. It's unfortunately because of the window there, it's pretty much whited out, but there's an access point there. I was able to pick up one of the access points from outside in the parking lot. So they did have WPA2 with AES turned on. So the actual machine that they issued the certificate and actually wrote the certificate onto the smart card was in a separate room right next to the break room. It was a Windows XP machine. As you can see, it wasn't patched in a long time. So I was alone with this machine for 10 minutes. I had to restrain myself, and one thing that I did notice here is they had that pony plug. That would have been perfect for this because the machine was underneath of the table. There was a whole spaghetti mess of wires back there. It would have worked out perfectly. So looking at the actual network that the CA has, they have a /24 that's non-portable. Here's some of the major hosts that they have that are involved with the issuance of certificates and ordering of certificates. I actually ran the Nmap scan this morning because I didn't want to take any risk of them picking me up from at home and then, blocking me out. The one thing that I did find that was interesting was the pager service. It was an open TCP 444, and then also the Netscape Messenger Express service. I didn't look into that, how old that was, but I assume since it literally still had like a Netscape web browser 2.0 type logo with the N, that it's probably extremely old. And if it's a messenger service, I don't think I'd want to use it over port 80. So I mentioned the ECA network security. So here's from the DoD policy for ECAs. Pretty much anyone can become an ECA. 2 requirements are you got to follow this policy. You have to undergo testing with the Joint Interoperability Test Command. They've got 2 locations, one in Fort Huachuca and one in Indian Head, Maryland. So some of the protections, you got to have a firewall, you got to have an IDS, and they have to be approved by NIFCC under the medium robustness protection profile. Give me a second, I'll get into that shortly. So physical security, you got to have only use CA for CA functions, so that hardware shouldn't be used for other purposes. I already talked a little bit about leaving the place unattended. Security containers, I presume they probably have, GSA type, safe security containers that they actually store the hardware security modules in. The policy does touch on how the keys should be issued, how they should be handled. Talks about background checks for the employees that deal with, issuance of the certificates. Also talks about separation of duties. So, can I buy one of these certificates? Yes, you can. So in addition to actually going into and ordering it, walk-in type basis, you can also order one online. So the difference is between ordering the smart card based one and getting the one online is you have to go to a notary. You can get one of these certificates if you're a U.S. citizen. There's different procedures outlined if you're a U.S. citizen or Five Eyes, so if you're from the UK or Canada. So you have to, in a way, assert your citizenship through, let's say, a U.S. passport or a Canadian passport. There is a section that is for other foreign nationals. So you could be a citizen of Uganda or you could be a citizen of Brazil and get one of these. You could be a citizen of pretty much any country and get one of these. So if you don't want to go visit them in person, you can enroll here through VeriSign. Follow all the steps. You fill out the forms online. It prints it out. There's a separate form that is generated that you go and have notarized, and then you wind up, putting it in snail mail and send it out to Symantec. So here's what I did. For this certificate, I actually went down to my local UPS store, walked in with my certificate, my driver's license. 5 minutes later, I had a piece of notary signed, authenticated paper that said, hey, I'm good to go for ECA certificate. Now, okay, I did have a passport. I'm a U.S. citizen, so it's not that difficult. So here's the bigger kicker. What does it take to become a notary? Depends on what state you're in. So in Virginia, where I'm from, you got to be 18. You got to be able to read and write English. I guess there was a requirement that you had to be a U.S. citizen, but there was a court case that dealt with having that being discriminatory. So it costs $45. You got to get to the courthouse within 60 days to take your oath. They don't require that you have a notary log. So in the log, they note, who was there, what was purpose was for, who notarized it. So because there's like 3 employees there at the store that are notaries. I've had other stuff notarized there, and it was somebody else that day, even though both of the people that had done notary work for me were there that day. Notary handbook goes into excruciating detail of what you can do. Here in Kentucky, the requirements are a little bit different. I would say they're probably a little bit laxer. You got to be age 18, good moral character, so you guys are all out. It's $10, and you have to go take your oath within 30 days. The bond, which there isn't one required in Virginia, varies by county. And again, there's the site for the handbook. So great, you've got your certs, you've got your middleware, now what are you going to do? So in every industry, including the defense industries, there's industry trade rags where you can get all kinds of information. So flipping through one of these one day, I saw this. There's a ongoing intelligence, show just like sort of like DerbyCon is. And from that, you've got a couple people here, pretty prominent people. You've got General Alexander, who's the head of Cybercom and NSA. And then you've got Mr. Clapper, who's the DNI. So let's go into JEDS. So here's where the authentication happens. I go to the site, it pops up the window to confirm the certificate, and then you have to enter a PIN that is used by the middleware to confirm that you actually are the right person that owns the smart card. You get the little DoD warning banner, and then you go ahead and enter first and last name, and you get the results. And yes, I did redact those on purpose. I did not want to disclose a whole bunch of people's email addresses, but as you can see, there's actually 3 valid email addresses for him. So going in more details, and oh, by the way, if anybody saw Warvox, I'd be very interested to see if HD's already hit the 301 area code within the 688 exchange and what his results were. Here's some more information as far as where he's located. The suite number is blacked out. And you can see that based upon this, he's got a hardware certificate, bottom left-hand corner. It is a CAC issued by the CA, and then, of course, the dates that they're valid. Then he's got a couple more certificates here. The reason that there's 2 listed is because one of them has probably been compromised or they lost it, and so he had to have a new certificate generated for his NSA email address. So looking at Mr. Clapper, we can find him also. So going back to other high-ups in DoD, I was not able to find Leon Panetta or Robert Gates, the previous Secretary of Defense. Looking at Mr. Lin, he was just recently confirmed as the deputy, so that's probably why he's still listed in there. I don't know if that means he'll be pulled out or when the next time he gets a CAC issued, that he'll be pulled out at that time. So there's more information. So you guys know this guy. Whether you agree with what he did or not, I'd hate to be these other guys. So there's at least one other guy here, or three other people that have the same name as him. And one of them, the two bottom ones, they don't identify what the service is, but the other guy's in the Navy. So then again, if you hover over it, you can actually pull the URL from the direct link, so you can go there directly. So here's another thing that's interesting. He's got a CAC. So he is still actually on active duty. He was scheduled to be discharged from the Army because of the offense that he's accused of and his confinement. He's still considered to be on active duty, which means his CAC card is still good. However, it expires tomorrow night, and I'll be very interested to see if he is issued another one or if they'll just let him keep his old one, because on his current one, it will expire at the end of the month. They actually, in the upper right-hand corner, print the month and year of expiration. So that was a simple query. We can look for people with a name. We can do some other stuff here as far as some logic. We can look at rank. So if we start looking for just general and we just do a search, that won't get us any 4-star general officers. We try to do the name. They want the first 3 characters of the name. We do the middle name. They haven't changed that. So if you just know the middle initial, you can find it. So if you also then try to do that on the first name, you get the same result. There's another way you can do this. So if you go looking at this, a good idea for a query would be based upon the email address. So if it ends in .mil, which every address should, you'll get, well, I'll show you. So you get all the 4-star general officers that end in .mil. There shouldn't be any that, are not listed. So there's 44 of them. Yeah, it's kind of sensitive. I debated whether I should show it or not, but you can go out and you can find all of them anyway. So are there any out there that end in .com? This used to work. I've been working on coming up with all kinds of interesting queries. Unfortunately, someone's been watching the logs, and they actually have been looking at this and sort of restricting what can be done. So if you want to get a little bit more specific, you can do Army.mil. You can get the Army ones, the Air Force. You won't get any generals in the Navy. You can also look at the Navy or admirals, Marine Corps. And so based upon the middle name with A, you can wind up hovering over the name Stanley McChrystal. He's already retired. You can wind up getting information such as phone numbers. Cartwright, he's retired also. You can narrow it down to, let's say, Pentagon.mil. You'll narrow the scope, get the same type of information. You can also look at public affairs type websites. You can get information about the leadership of that organization. So you've got Admiral Olson, find out stuff about him. He was the first Navy SEAL to be the commander of SOCOM. So there you'll have his email address. And again, if you want to make a donation, feel free. Then you'll get more information in detail. And again, all that you had to do for this is assert your identity and plunk down $100. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. They're actually looking for that type of collaboration. So I know that there have been different projects that have not looked at SourceForge in that great of a detail. But the only thing I've done over there is grab the DoD configuration add-in for Firefox and Thunderbird. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. There was a long discussion I had because I had to run this past legal and I had to run it past OPSEC, and they're like, "Well, this is all FOUO," and I'm like, "Yeah, but $100 in my identity gets me access to it. I didn't use my CAC that I have, so what's the big deal? I mean, great, it's FOUO. The CRLs are FOUO, so." So here, further again, you can go down the ranks. You can look at kernels. That's about as far as I went. You can also find people that have their CACs registered with the email address of other ISPs. So you've got Yahoo, Gmail, and then of course I tried some other components. There's other ones in there. So NSA's got people that have CACs with their nsa.gov email address. The actual other portal, GDS, will allow you to query by PKI component versus this one won't. So here's a general that I found who was listed as a contractor, but his rank still turned him up when I did the search for general.com. That's been restricted. And oh, by the way, anytime I have the little ECA certificate up in the right-hand corner, that means I had to have the certificate to get access to that. So this is all the information about him. One of the things that you do get is the Army has this thing called Army Knowledge Online, www.us.army.mil. It has a people type function just as like a lot of corporate portals do. And one of the things that you can do is you can put your phone number in, your email address. Well, this retired general officer has his home address in there and his home phone number. So you could send Mr. X a encrypted email to his Yahoo address, which would result in him not being able to read it, because I doubt he's got a way to read the S-MIME encoding, and then decrypt it with his CAC. And what you could do is you could send it to him encrypted. He'll respond back, "Hey, I can't read your email. Send it to me unencrypted." And you could put a URL in there or some type of link, you know, an attachment. You've established a level of trust. He'll probably click it. So this is where he lives. Nice digs. So he's actually responsible. I grew up in Europe. I grew up actually in Germany. Moved here to the States back in 2003 for the first time in my life. And he was the guy who gave away Heidelberg back to the Germans. The Germans were supposed to get it back in 2015 with the BRAC change. So that's why I threw him in there. So that web portal is great, but if you wanted to do something, you would want to script it. You'd want to be able to retrieve this type of information without having to go through the web page. So we go to the FAQ, and we see that JEDS will support LDAP or SAML. So you're supposed to contact them. You can get it with your soft cert. Supposedly there's no way right now with software to use a smart card. So you can do all this, you know, through an LDAP client. So back to what the crazies did. They said, hey, we've got the CRL stuff out there, but they missed some other interesting stuff. So we did this query back at the beginning. This leads to this website where you can download root CAs. And if you look at the various items on here, you can request a server-side certificate, you get the warning, and you wind up at this site. Again, certificate manager, it's unclass FOUO. Anybody can get to it. You don't need a certificate. It's open to the internet. So looking at each of the tabs, we've got no cert to revoke, but we want to search certificates. So I just put in a blank search, you know, randomly for Cybercom, and this popped up. So here's the actual certificate for the Cybercom website, which is actually restricted to ECA and CAT. And just as Mr. Potter pointed out, he's only got a 1024-bit key. And actually, I do believe the requirement is to issue 2048 keys, and has been for a while. So again, you can do interesting queries on this information. Not only are you going to get revoked certificates, you're going to get current certificates also. So looking for VPN, you're going to wind up with things like VPN concentrators. So here's a couple of Navy examples. The key here to remember is, again, like I said earlier, These are not necessarily host names that you can resolve from your location. They may be internal network components, but there's a split DNS, but there's no split PKI. You're going to see stuff from the inside and the outside, and that may give you very good information on what's in there. So again, I tried OU of NSA. So here's all the different things that you can break down and limit your query by. Dates the certificate expires, so you can look for something during the period of your pen test that's going to be expiring very soon. You may be able to do some social engineering. Maybe the certificate's already expired. Maybe you can get someone to go ahead and accept the certificate anyway. There is a limit on this of 99 results, and there is a timeout. So we'll look at possibly doing some exploitation. You can get a free email certificate from Komodo. You can also roll your own. Why would you want to do this? Well, you can bypass the antivirus on a server because the content of your message is going to be encrypted. Again, the headers and the actual subject is going to be in the clear, but the other stuff will be encrypted. So ideally, you'd want to get one email cert that you can reuse with different mailboxes. So there's actually a add-on to Gmail that works perfectly for this. In Outlook 2010, you can't actually have the email address and the certificate be different. So this is the actual plugin. You wind up doing some changes. Here's a certificate that I had issued for free. It didn't cost me a dime. And you wind up changing those settings there. You select the certificate. And I have not tried this, but it would be interesting to see what happens if you include the root CA, if it would then not even check the certificate store on the machine. So again, you've got to make sure that you have the settings enabled so you can use your Gmail account to log in. This is what it looks like as far as the Gmail interface. This is how it proceeds. Once it's done, it winds up coming into the other person's inbox. So here you have a perfectly signed email. Looks good, so unless you're paying attention to the signed by, which I would argue most users won't, you're good to go. And to a person that's in the DoD, this would be perfectly okay. You could click on any type of link or open any type of attachment. So again, the circled box, if I set my machine date back to the 1st of April, the certificate won't be valid. The only reason that box pops up like that is because you've got the little checkbox about warning on digital certificates. So even if you had that unchecked, the only warning you would see is a red line and then the little red exclamation mark in the yellow. Again, probably not that difficult, for a user to ignore because there's nothing that says danger here other than a little red line. So, addition to some existing tools that I'd like to see, Chris John Riley actually had a blog post about stuff at DerbyCon. He's actually adding in and writing the code for Metasploit so you can roll your own CA dynamically. He's like, yeah, you could do your own OpenSSL, but why bother when you can have Metasploit do it in 15 seconds? Carlos Perez actually he has the ticket. He's fine-tuning the code where you can do this in Metasploit and actually add CA roots to search the actual machine. Dave Kennedy, I've got to talk to him about adding a capability into SET where you could do encrypted and signed email. So a project that I'm launching here is Secure Your Badge. I'm in DC. I see tons of people walking around in the metro with their badges hanging out, and they should be putting those away. So if you do catch somebody doing that, do a post to Secure Badge. And I don't know if we'll have time for the demo, but again, I'll take any questions and I'll get the demo prepped. Yeah. Vulnerabilities, you can get an ECA certificate from any of the approved vendors. So you get one from all three, or I'd say as long as you have a different email address, if you wanted to register your 5 email addresses, that would be no problem. Okay. Sorry. Thanks. One more hint on the online demo. If you go out to